seeking leadership of the New Brunswick Liberal Party. Thank you so much for being here again, Robert.
Thank you for having me here again.
I want to talk again, because you were here quite a while ago,
Yes.
a little bit about your background before people vote for who will be the leader very soon. But I did want to talk about first something we didn't touch on last time, which is the fact that of the 4 candidates, you are the only one who is currently an MLA of CHCO-TV. So
Yes.
what does that do in terms of maybe an advantage it would give you if you are chosen as leader?
Well, it is the day after the convention. An elected member can question the premier right in the assembly, and then you get traction, you get the media traction, you know the files, and you're in there. So you can ask the questions, you can ask the people's questions, because I ask people to send me questions, and the important questions are asked, and they can be asked directly to the premier. So that's very important, and you work with caucus all the time, so you have you have the real point of view of all the province, and you can start to build for the next election.
Can we look back at something like a situation with the last election when Kevin Vickers was leader, but then he didn't win his seat? Is that always something that could be a potential?
Well, the thing is when you run for leadership, the election period is 28 days. If you're the leader, you have to go all over the province and still win your seat. But if you're in danger in your seat, you cannot do the province like you should. You have to be secure enough in your seat that you can run all over the province to help others get elected and to listen to people. Most importantly, listen to the people on the ground. And people want to speak to the leader. So you have to be able to do that. And to do that, you have to be secure enough in your seat.
Now, you've been on the campaign trail for quite some time now. When we first talked, it was just sort of starting. You're usually based in CHCO-TV, but what have you learned from, I've seen you a lot in Charlotte County.
Yes.
Charlotte County Pride, I saw you at Hillary's Hope for Hunger in
Yes.
St. George, which
Yes.
was back in April. Can you tell me a little bit about where you've been in Charlotte County in particular and what you've taken away from that?
Well, I've been all over the place, and it's important because I came here, I think, 6 times. There was once with all the candidates. We had an informal forum that night. I came to meet the association, like I said, the Pride. And for me, I want to congratulate the kids and the organizers, because to have that here, I was so touched. But that I even forget in TV, I forgot to say my own name, who I was. I was so touched because I told those kids, you are here, you are standing up for what's right. And that is very important, because most of the time when something comes out, you hear the opposing point of view, but nobody's for it speaks out, and that scares me. But that day, those kids were heard loud and clear, and I felt proud to be here.
It was our 4th ever Charlotte County Pride Walk, first ever in St. George, and I believe that was the largest turnout we've ever
Yes.
had in a rural place like we are in. It was incredible to see. Why was that event in particular something that you felt was important to be a part of?
Well, I feel that as elected officials, the kids and the people who organize need to feel the support. So when the time comes that we make government, they know they have an open door, open mind, and somebody that will listen. And you have to come not only during election period, but every chance you get. I don't refuse an invitation. When I feel something is right, I don't refuse an invitation, because when it's the right thing to do, just you being there sends a message that you care about it and you're serious about it. Mm-hmm. And also for Hillary's Hope, it was important to be here. Just a shout out to Patty, and it's important also awareness for what she went through, so that's important as well. Mm-hmm. And again, those are all positive things that people organize that bring the region and the place together, and that's important. And we need to do more of this all over the province. Mm-hmm. People that get involved with the community and do the right thing, and I think that's what New Brunswick's all about. People in communities.
For people who might not be familiar, I think most people in Charlotte County are, but Hillary's Hope for Hunger, those watching at home, is a food drive for Hillary, who lost her life to suicide.
We have to stop.
Okay, yeah.
I had a walk in front of the camera there.
Oh, Patrick?
Vicki, if you could just restart that question, then we'll be fine.
Oh, okay.
Of course I did. Sorry.
You did?
Doing good so far, Bev?
Yes, just pick up right here.
Okay.
Okay.
At least remember what it was. I think most people know what Hillary's Hope for Hunger is, but for those at home who don't, it's a food drive for Hillary, who is Patty Borthwick's daughter, who
Yes.
lost her life to suicide. And I know you mentioned before we started filming that healthcare was one of the most important issues you heard from New Brunswickers that they care about.
Yes.
But I'd love to know, what were those key issues that, from meeting people, from spending the summer thus far campaigning and going door to door and going to different communities, what have you heard from New Brunswickers in terms of what they want?
That's a great question, because the main thing is healthcare all over the province, and you saw what happened the last few weeks. We all know about it. We all know, and it's not to try to bang on something like that, but it's what people talk about, healthcare, because we are an aging province, and a lot of people are afraid. They want to keep their services. They want to make sure that if they need a doctor, they have one. A lot of people don't have doctors right now in New Brunswick. And for me, that's been, even before this race started, it's been over 2 years of my life that I've spoken to people on the ground, nurses, doctors, people that were on boards, and people, all over, the experts, everybody. Because as an MLA, I have access to these guys. And 3 things came out, very important. Staffing issues. We have people from other countries that can work in BC and Ontario, but they cannot work in New Brunswick. That needs to be fixed. They have 12 recruiters in Nova Scotia who recruit aggressively for healthcare. We have 1 position here in New Brunswick, and it was vacant. I don't know if it has been filled, but there's just 1. It's not enough. And we lost 4 oncologists. I don't wish an oncologist on anybody, but if you need one, you should have one. And they're leaving because the relationship with this government is not as respectful, I think, as it should be. So those are points that we can work on right now to help. And mental health, also very important. You spoke about, you touched on it a little bit, but that's very important. We need to talk about it, and we need to do more. And also seniors care, because in nursing homes, after the pandemic, we're gonna hear stories that we won't like. And I mean, these guys in nursing homes, they build this province for us. So they deserve the dignity that they work for. They work for us. So we need to do better by them.
I might use this moment talking about healthcare to pivot and go back in history. You started your career as a conservative in politics.
Yes.
Can we talk about, it was healthcare though that was a pivotal moment for you, that made you become an independent and then ultimately lead to your career in the Liberal Party. Can we talk about
Yes.
where you started and how you got to where you are now?
Well, I was elected in 2018 in Shippagan, Lamec-Miscou, as a conservative. But then when it happened with healthcare, the only thing that could be done to try to prevent the closures of emergency rooms all over the province at night. Imagine when you're at the most vulnerable, if you get sick at midnight or something like that, they would have been closed all over the province. So the only thing that could be done to prevent this in a minority government was me walking out. So that's what I did, and that it's was the worst week of me and my wife's life, because that's the toughest decision that I've ever made. But same situation, I would do it again, because it led to me where I am right now, and it's more. I feel very comfortable where I am right now with the Liberal Party, but it needed to be done, and that's the only thing that could be done to prevent it. And I'm happy because a lot of that helped a lot of people that this stayed open. Could you imagine the hospitals around the big hospitals, like the rural hospitals in Sussex, Sackville, for example, and Sainte-Marie-de-Kent? Hospital in Moncton could not afford during the pandemic. If those 3 ERs would have closed, it would have been a bigger mess than it is right now. So I believe it was the right thing to do. It was not fun, but.
Was there fear at that time, going into the unknown? And first you went independent.
Yes.
But you'd been deputy premier. You were walking away from a lot. Was there fear at that moment that maybe you were ending your political career by making that choice?
Well, that was all part of it. Because you think, I'm leaving a job I might never get again, with no place to go. Because you're an independent, you had no place to go. So yes, it was a big decision, because one of the feeling was, am I continuing in politics? Am I, because nobody knew what's going to happen after. When you make a decision like that, there's no guarantees after. So you do it and you accept the consequences, and it was a family decision between me and my wife, and we couldn't go on. At a certain point, you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, can I accept that? Especially when I knew that we were not telling the whole story to the population in New Brunswick. So when you can't go for something like that, you have to do it. It's not fun, and it's done, and it's, it's time to move on. But we felt it was the right thing to do.
And so what brought you from independent to the Liberal Party? What was the decision making that went into that?
Well, the values. I am fiscally responsible and socially conscious. So I think a lot of people in New Brunswick need help, and right now they're not getting it. You can travel all over the province, they are not getting it. A lot of small programs have been cut that help people in schools, kids in schools, everything like that. They're not getting it. So we need to identify people who need help and help them. And the values of the Liberal Party they're exactly that. And during this race, that's what we heard all around the province. I think people are ready for us to get back there.
We talked a little bit about this last time you were here. Last election, though, Liberals didn't do as well as previously. Higgs was no longer a minority government. Do you have hope that things will change? And what do you think that you will bring to the table if you're elected that will get more traction for the Liberal Party going forward?
Well, engaging people. Right now, everywhere in the province, we feel that people want to be engaged again. And I like to go see people. And as politicians now, social media is good, is great, but the main thing is you have to go everywhere in the province and listen to people. And that's what I will bring, because we need to be strong everywhere in the province, and we don't need to be divided. We can all work together, but to be able to work together, we have to talk to each other. And the best way to do that is to show up. And like I said, I've been here 6 times. You show up and people say, okay, there's a trust. There's beginning to be a trust between the people. So that's important. I think that's the thing that'll bring, and teamwork. People who are going to get on the team, they know they will participate. And they know this is not going to be a one-man show. This is going to be a whole team effort. And one of the basic human needs is being part of something. And we feel it right now, and people feel like, okay, we need to get involved because I know we can do better. Mm-hmm.
What do you think? You're running against 3 other people. What sets you apart from them? What makes you the better candidate in your mind?
Well, I believe, they're all good. Everybody's good, and I'm not going to knock anybody out because I've got a good relationship with Donald, who's an NTJ, so there's no problem there. I would say, I'm elected, so that helps. I'm already in there, and I have the experience. I was put in a tough spot when I was where I was, so I know what's going on over there as well, and the willingness, just the sheer desire, the focus, the desire, and I am willing to put everything on the line. So I believe the people in Brunswick know I'm loyal to them, so I am willing to put everything on the line. I'm not looking for a long career, or I'm just looking to help, and I feel right now is the right time to help, so that's why I'm in this.
One of my favorite things about you is that your career prior to politics was as a comedian. Yeah. Has that helped you politically in any way? I mean, if we look at someone like, I say that sincerely, I look at someone like Zelensky, who is one of the heroes of the age we're living in right now, who himself was a comedian. But in what way did the career you had in the arts set you up for the trail you're on now?
I would say the best thing about the arts, and every artist, no matter what the art is, the truth. If you get to the truth, it gets better. And you cannot lie to yourself. Because if you want to be a good artist, you can't lie. If you want to send a good show, you want to make a good show for people, you cannot lie to yourself. So you have to get to the bottom of things. You have to get to the truth, and I believe that's one thing that's very important. And also that when you have an artistic side, you're more sensitive. Some people see that as a weakness in politics. I know where I was, they saw that as a weakness, but I think being sensitive, you have to keep it, because when things start not affecting you, it's dangerous. So I get affected. If I see something that's makes me sad, I'll be sad. If I see something that's won't be good, I will say something. So it's important to keep that side, and that's the artistic side. And I'm not comparing myself at all with that Zelensky president because he's a tremendous human being, but I think it's good for the artists everywhere to show that this job of politics is for everyone. It's not just for a certain type of people; it's for everyone. So I'm happy about that.
Now, you've mentioned healthcare, obviously, and we're still in the midst of a pandemic, a different chapter of it, but it's still here. And you've mentioned healthcare going forward as being a major priority for the province. But what else do you see as our collective challenges and obstacles that we'll be facing in the next few years?
Well, all globally, you have the environment, also education is very important. I think and housing in New Brunswick, of course, the housing crisis has to be worked on. So there's a lot of things because the province of New Brunswick, the government in New Brunswick is responsible for over 50,000 regulations. So depending on where you sit, something might be more important to you than others. But like I said, the environment, is going to get, if we don't do anything, it's going to get worse and worse. We're just speeding things up, so we have to react on that. The housing crisis, can't stand seeing people living in the streets or don't have a roof over their heads. So that's important. And education, I've realized something during this race. A generation ago, we took trades outside of schools, and right now, a generation later, we have problems staffing in those jobs, electricians, people who work in garages, carpenters and that stuff. We took that away in schools, and now we see the results a generation later. So there's a lot of things important, and we need to work one at a time. We focus on one thing at a time, and we fix it.
If you're looking at the Higgs government, it's a government you've been a part of too. What do you think would make a Liberal Party that you would be the leader of stronger than the government we currently have?
Well, you listen to the people. Because you saw what happened. When people don't want something, government will change its mind. So why not? And they use the pandemic to bring reforms. So people were not properly consulted. So I believe if you consult people face to face, it's not the same thing as being on a Zoom meeting or something like that. So we would try to be close to people, try to listen to people and get people involved, and we would open the door to people who want to help their community. If you come and ask for something for yourself, I say, okay, I'll give it to you as long as what you want is good for your community, because this is what we need more of in New Brunswick. So I believe if we get to that and we engage people in that, because there's a lot of people in New Brunswick who are helping all over the place. You go to community breakfasts everywhere, so there's a lot of good things going on, hockey tournaments and whatnot. So we need to encourage that. And I was speaking with a guy from St. George today, and he was talking about a car show that was in Moncton this weekend. So what a great thing but you need a lot of volunteers to make this happen. And this is good for the economy as well. So we need to engage people in that also, because right now there's challenges to getting people involved. Yeah.
Obviously, the pandemic, the silver lining, I think, for a lot of us in New Brunswick is that so many people, not just in Canada, but around the world, discovered us for the first time. Things about us we knew were wonderful already. But not just looking at challenges, let's look at strengths for a second. What would you say are some of our best strengths that we haven't really mined to their full capacity?
In New Brunswick, we speak about our resources, but the best resource we have is our people. No matter where you come from, what's your culture, it's our people. We've lived hundreds of years here. We never had a war with each other. We have good people in New Brunswick. So that's number one. Second thing, we could have a better economy if we help small businesses, medium businesses more, because they make up 98% of the business world in New Brunswick. So those are things that we can work on that would make New Brunswick better, and those are strengths because those small businesses are all over the province. And if they grow with private sector jobs, which is very important for any economy, and we have it in New Brunswick. And plus we have products that people all over the world want. We have wood, fish, we have everything we need, and we can help all over the world. Plus, people don't know this, but we have free trade with France. New Brunswick has an open door to Europe through France. We have free trades, which apply to every business in New Brunswick, no matter where you are. So there's a lot of possibility. We just need to get on it and make it work. So I think New Brunswick will rebound very well. I'm very hopeful of what we can do because we have the right people here. In New Brunswick, people are humble, they're hardworking, and they have respect for one another, and we should put the light on that.
Last time you were here, this is how long ago it was, people were still registering to vote.
Yes.
There were some news headlines that talked about the numbers being lower than, let's say, the time Brian Gallant was elected leader. Why do you think the numbers are lower? Could it be in part pandemic related, summer related even?
It can be all of it, but it's like I said earlier in this interview, it's harder and harder to engage people. You can see the number. I know the last time, and it's not a comparison, just those are facts. In 2016, somebody gave me the numbers for the Conservative Convention. There was 7,000 people registered, 5,000 voted. It's tougher and tougher to engage people, and so it is. And summertime, people, it's and people have to know, they have to register. So all challenges that we had to work on. But I'd say right now, and that's why I'm speaking about engaging people, because like I said, if people would get involved in politics, they would know how much politics is a part of our life every day. So that's why we need to work on that.
And New Brunswick, it's always so interesting too, because when you look at the numbers, when it's thousands, you really do feel like your vote makes a difference.
Yes.
So as we're recording this will be playing during the votes for the next leader, as well as the interviews with the other candidates.
Yes.
What do you say to people for why they should vote for you?
Well, what you see is what you get. Like my wife, before I came into politics, my wife told me, said, you have one rule, don't change. Because I was never involved in politics before. So I stayed the same person all the way through, and like I said, what you see is what you get. And when I did what I did with the hospital thing, you cross a line, and that line is doing the right thing. And once you do that, you never want to go back. So that's it. I'm gonna put people first, because I have something, might be a quality or a flaw depending on how you use it, but if people are not happy, it affects me. If somebody around me is not happy, it affects me. It hurts me. So one thing, I try to please as many people as I can, and every MLA for every riding will be respected, and working together with everybody.
And so for people watching at home, the deadline is August
the 6th. The vote will start on 30th of July, or is going on right now, depending on when this airs. But the convention will be August the 6th.
So what does that do for you, Robert? If you win, are you just leader? And then what will your first moves be?
Well, one of the first moves will be going to every riding that we don't have MLAs right now, and trying to find good candidates and speak to the people on the ground what the needs are of every riding, so we can find out what would be important here. And I say to people, if the community there's 10 major regions in New Brunswick, if communities get behind a project and each community said, this is the one that we like, we will make it happen. And those are things that are important, and people will feel listened to, and they know that we will work on it. And like I said, we want an engaged caucus. We want, because all the province has to be in it. It cannot just be regions by regions. All the province has to be in it for it to work.
And when you mention working together, do you feel equally as able to work with people regardless of the party they are at in the legislature?
To me, if people want to help, if somebody comes with a personal agenda, you can see it pretty quickly. But if people want to work and want to help, hey, if people want to help, that's good. It's harder and harder to find in politics, but it's doable. We want to work with people who want to help. And I think more and more people vote for the person. They don't vote for the party. I think it's a good thing. But right now, I believe the liberal values are more what people in New Brunswick need.
We've just got a couple minutes left now, so I would love to leave the final words with you as we get to this nearing election. What do you want people to remember, not just about why they should vote for you, but why they should vote at all?
Because it affects their life, everyday life, and their I know it's my slogan there, but their voice matters, and it should matter, because this is public service. We do that for them. It's not an easy job. It's a 7-day-a-week job. People have problems every hour of the day, so they try to reach you every hour of the day. So they have to, if they voice their opinion, and then they participate. And when you participate, you can talk about it, you can criticize, you can try to help. You're in it, and that's very important. And because right now we see the tendencies of voting is getting lower and lower, and it's not good. It's not good for democracy, because the more people that vote, the better chance you have to have the best representation, because all of the people have voted.
Well, I appreciate you coming back to sit with me again.
Thank you very much.
Please do the doors open whenever you're in Charlotte County.
Thank you very much.
My guest today is seeking leadership of the New Brunswick Liberal Party, Susan Holt. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So for people who might not be as familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what your background is?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Fredericton. That's where I call home. I went to Connaught Street School. That's where I learned French. I was lucky enough to take the early French immersion program from grade 1 all the way up to grade 9. Alors, je suis bilingue, je peux parler français. Et je pense que c'est important pour un premier ministre. I think it's important for a premier to be able to speak both languages. As a kid, I was an outdoor kid. I loved being a camp counselor and going in the woods and camping and that kind of thing. And I was a rugby player, so I got to play rugby for New Brunswick for a couple of years. It was nice to wear the New Brunswick flag on my jersey and do that. I went away to school in Ontario. I did. I'm a bit of a nerd, I guess I would say. I did a degree in chemistry and a degree in economics at Queen's. And then most of my career was built in the private sector. So I moved to Toronto, Australia, India, Ottawa, all working for tech companies, doing sales, doing marketing, doing HR work. I moved back to New Brunswick in 2007 because my high school sweetheart was ready to settle down. So moved home, we got married. We have 3 daughters, a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 4-year-old, all little girls. And it was when I moved back home in 2007 that I started getting more engaged in the community work that I think has brought me into politics. So I was lucky enough to be chosen to be the CEO of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce back in 2010. And that role really introduced me to advocacy for the small business community, working with municipal politicians, provincial politicians, federal politicians in some cases, working to advance the issues that were important to the small business community in Fredericton. And in Fredericton, we had a lot of not-for-profit members, actually. There's probably 30% of the chamber membership were charitable organizations and not-for-profits. So we actually had to do a lot of consensus building around the policy table to figure out what we were putting forward to government, make sure it represented the interests of all of our members. I really loved that work. It was because you're really engaged. It also gave me the chance to interact with media. Spent a lot of time doing TV and radio and that kind of thing on behalf of the chamber. And it gave us the chance to host the State of the Province. So I learned when I joined the chamber was in a bit of a challenging situation. They'd been losing money, they'd been losing members. And so with my leadership and the team there and our board of directors, we were able to turn it around within 18 months, grow the membership, and put on the most interactive State of the Province event that I think the province has ever seen, where we polled our members for questions, we let people vote on those questions, and Premier Allward graciously took unexpected questions from us based on what the people of New Brunswick said they wanted to hear. I went on from the Chamber to the New Brunswick Business Council, so similarly still working with the provincial government, working with the business community. And at the Business Council, I really tried to open up the work. We invited people into our meetings, junior achievers, startup entrepreneurs. We started live streaming some of our presentations and debates. And then the government at the time created something called the Jobs Board, and that was a new organization in government meant to create an economic growth plan. And so I applied for a position to be a part of the Jobs Board, and in 2015 I became a civil servant. So I got to spend 3 years understanding how the bureaucracy worked, working with departments, working with the Executive Council, working with the Premier's office and cabinet, I had the chance to be on the floor of the legislature passing red tape reduction legislation and learning that process. And so I think it's been really helpful for me to see all these different parts of the system. And to that point in 2018, I decided to become a candidate. I ran as a candidate for the Liberal Party in that election and loved it. Loved door knocking, loved talking to people about our province and the things that they cared about. The Liberals didn't win that election, so I returned to the private sector. For the last 3 years, I've been working for a social enterprise called Play-Doh Testing and its sister company PQA. That's a company that recruits, trains, and hires Indigenous people in software testing careers. And we do that out of Fredericton and out of the Miramichi, as well as across Canada. I've been responsible for the growth of the company, the sales and marketing arm, and more recently, the people arm. So I think, maybe to summarize that whole little blurb about me, I'm someone that loves to come in and make change. That's what I've done at the Chamber, at the Business Council, and government, and with Play-Doh. And I think that I've had the chance now to see community work, government work, private sector work, political work, and I think I have a perspective on how these systems come together that I'd like to offer New Brunswickers and Liberals to suggest that there's a more collaborative, there's a more open and transparent way that we could do government.
I read in an interview that you said you'd like to shake things up. So what exactly did you mean by that, and what do you think specifically needs shaking up? Obviously more transparency, but in what ways would you do that?
Yeah, I think we're watching a real loss of trust in government and loss of trust in politicians. I think we've seen over time and time again that people really don't feel represented and don't feel like they can access the people that are supposed to be representing them. And so I think we really do need to change both how parties work and how government works to rebuild that trust. And so being more open and transparent is a big part of that. And so specifically to me, transparency means open data. There's a whole movement around digital government and open data to make available the information that supports policymaking, but also could support the participation of citizens, everyday folks, researchers into that policymaking. I think it means that as politicians, we really have to behave differently. We have to have public meetings. We have to be accessible to people. People have to understand where and how you're spending your time. They have to know that they can reach you and that you're prepared to talk with anyone, because to rebuild that trust, I think it's going to require vulnerability. I think as parties, we have to move away from this world of talking points, right? I'm sure you've probably interviewed a ton of politicians, and sometimes you can tell when you get there and they're just delivering a talking point and they're not getting at the question, and that's what erodes trust. So I think we need to be brave and recognize that local representatives can and should voice the needs of their community. Right? There is maybe some guidance or a script that comes from the party, but the local representative should be able to say, this is what my neighbors want and need, and should be even allowed to vote that way. And so I think the shakeup is a bit of that. It's really putting more faith and trust in local representatives, ceasing the strong sort of partisanship or whippedness of the system, and then you add in that transparency, and I think that'll help us rebuild trust with the people of New Brunswick, and I think that'll help us earn the opportunity to govern. And so I think that transparency and authenticity will help people participate, right? If you can make visible the work, then that'll lend itself, I think, to greater input, greater interaction.
And obviously, your background in technology would show you a path to make things more transparent, put them online, and find ways of connecting that you could more so than maybe is doing now. Though I think the pandemic has played a role in opening up doors that we didn't think possible with government. Would you agree?
Definitely. I actually think it's an opportunity that we should be seizing, right? And New Brunswick at one point was a real leader in technology, right? We, back in NBTEL days, were advancing some firsts out there globally, and that's how some of our service models came about. But since those days, I think that we've stalled in our digital leadership, so I think now is the perfect time to really advance on e-health initiatives, look at what does digital health look like, how could we better serve people all over the place with telehealth models, how do we get our health data on the same platform, right? We have hospitals that are using different systems. And so if you're a nurse here at the local hospital and then you move to work at a different hospital, you're going to run into a different data system, and that means patient information isn't consistent. And so patients don't get well served, and there's a lot of extra administration in that system. So I think we should be embracing some of the shifts that people started to make during the pandemic and really moving forward with those, because it's more efficient. You get better service to citizens and people. It should be less costly. And so I think there's some innovative things we could do there. And that's on the health side. That actually applies across the spectrum, right? If we really accelerated digital government and got into a space where we could deliver services to most New Brunswickers through online mechanisms, it does require good high-speed internet access everywhere, right? I think there's an infrastructure piece that we need to address. There's lots of people who want to come move to New Brunswick. They want to do so if they can have access to high-speed internet. They want to be in our beautiful province, right? They want to be in the woods, or they want to be on the ocean or the bay, but they want access to healthcare, they want access to housing, and they need that internet to do the work they do today. So we should be accelerating our infrastructure and the services we deliver on it so that the people of New Brunswick get better service from government.
Now, some of your critics might say, oh, you haven't had a long enough political career to be running for leader, but your business career seems to inform a lot of what you would bring politically to the table. Can you talk a little bit about why you feel prepared for this role right now?
Yeah, well, I think politics as usual isn't working for us. I think that, if we want what we have today, we can keep doing things the way we've done them. But I think people don't want the status quo from our government. And so I think my perspective from working in the business community, from working at the community level, from working in government, gives me a broader perspective on issues and solutions, and maybe less habit or status quo of this is how we've always done things. I'm going to come at things a different way. But I actually think my perspective is maybe more comprehensive, because I have had a chance to both write policy, present it on the floor of the ledge, lobby for it outside of the system, and having an understanding of how all those pieces work, I think means that I can lead that system differently. But I also think we need to shake things up, right? I think we've been doing politics the same way for a lot of years, centuries, you might say.
And from the many lenses that you have, what would you say are some of New Brunswick's strengths right now that we should be looking into as a province that maybe we are undervaluing at this time?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think New Brunswick has a lot of strengths that we could be better leveraging. I think one of them is in the tourism side. I think, our tourism efforts are very efficient. The team in tourism has really learned, and you've probably seen that down here in Charlotte County, right? They can stretch a dollar, but we have some phenomenal assets, right? We are a gorgeous province. Obviously, we have the Bay of Fundy. We have historical beauty. We have cultural diversity. We have an artistic community that is unrivaled. Our music, there's a lot there that I think we could get more bang for our buck if we invested a little bit more. I think on the agricultural side, we are a province that produces primary resources, whether it's wood or farming or fishing or others, and there is opportunity to develop more creative products. There's people that are working to figure out how do you turn a fish into something even more valuable, the same way that we turned a potato into a French fry, into a hash brown, to get more value out of it. So those are a few. I think on the technology side, the world is our oyster, and specifically on the green tech side. We're doing some interesting things in biomass, in green energy development, in a whole bunch of different technology that supports both renewable energy as well as green infrastructure. So I think those are some areas that we could really see New Brunswick develop its economy in those areas.
I'm going to pivot for a second and just ask, and I've asked the other candidates I've had the chance to sit down with so far, what do you think, where do you think the Liberal Party is right now in New Brunswick? Why do you think maybe the last election the Liberal Party didn't finish as strongly as maybe they had hoped to?
I think the last election was a curious one because it was mid-pandemic, right? We I think the government chose to go into an election for that very reason, right? They were in a pandemic. They were looking for stability, wanting to get a majority status. It was a bit of a surprise. So unfortunately, I don't think the Liberal Party was ready. We were recruiting candidates desperately, sort of throwing together a campaign in short order. So I think that hurt. And at the time, we had a new leader who had very little time to introduce themselves to the public and gain experience in that public forum. And so I think that those were things that worked against us. I think actually this is a great opportunity for the Liberal Party now. We have a little bit of time and we have a big shift in society that's happening, right? The pandemic contributed to it, certainly, but we're seeing it with the war in the Ukraine, with things like the Freedom Convoy that are questioning our discourse as neighbors and as citizens. And I think it's the time for a new politics, right? It's the time for something different. The Liberal Party could write that chapter for New Brunswickers and say, okay, we're going to offer you something fresh, that's more transparent, that's more authentic. And that, I think, will earn the trust and interest of New Brunswickers.
And where is the campaign trail taking you at the moment? And what are you learning from speaking to New Brunswickers? And finally face to face a lot of the time now.
Yeah, you know what? It's been amazing getting to spend these last few months traveling all over the province, talking to New Brunswickers in every corner, because I mean, it feels like a real gift to be, we have a beautiful province, right? Whether I was in Petit Rocher a couple weeks ago, in Hillsborough a few days ago, you know, and everywhere I go, I hear pretty similar things, actually. People are frustrated. They don't feel heard or represented. They don't feel like anyone cares about them. And so I think that's why we need, you know, to do what the Liberal Party does best, right? The Liberal Party is a big heart party that really cares about helping people. I think we need to care for our caregivers. Everywhere I go, I hear about healthcare. Right? Most people are very, very concerned about the precarious nature of our healthcare system right now, about the nurses that are holding it up, about the people working in long-term care homes. I think there's a lot of anxiety around people's ability to find a family doctor, people's faith in the emergency system. So everywhere I go, I hear we need to fix our healthcare system and care for the people that are caring for us. That has to be a priority for the Liberal Party going forward. I hear about housing, I hear about environmental issues, I hear about economic issues, the need for labor, the need for education strengthening and immigration. There's lots of issues that people are interested in and want to see a more caring and a more connected and collaborative approach to addressing some of those big policy issues and big crises of our times. So I think the good news is it's really consistent. There's a lot of consensus around those priorities, and there's a really big consensus that we need to do something different. We can't approach these crises with the same politics that we've been using for the last century.
If you are elected leader, how will you bring the party together and really strengthen the party?
That's a good question, because people have sensed that there's fractions in the party. I've fortunately observed a lot of consistency among Liberals. Like I said, when I talk to folks, most Liberals say they want something fresh. It's time for some new ideas. It's time for new people. We want to unify people under this idea of New Brunswick that is transparent and open, where we have authentic politicians, a really collaborative approach. But my plan would be to go out and be in every riding and meet with Liberals and volunteers and riding associations and connect with people at a personal level. And not just do that on the ground, where it's really important to be there in person, but also do that technologically. So we could be doing virtual meetings. I'm hosting a Facebook Live on Monday night, right? Because you want to make yourself accessible in public forums to answer questions and to build relationships and get to know people. So I think once the Liberal Party chooses a new leader, there's a great opportunity to go out and connect digitally and in person and really figure out, where do we want to go collectively? What do we want to offer to New Brunswickers for the next election? And how can we energize the possibility of that and show that you could do politics differently, that the Liberal Party can do politics differently going forward.
So, and what's your summer going to be like? Is it?
Yeah, so from here, we're in a big push to the cutoff. There's a cutoff to register for to vote in the race on Wednesday, June 15th at 4:30 is the last point when you can get registered to get a ballot. After that, we have some forums. The association has organized some all-candidate forums, 7 of them in different parts of the province. We're going to go back out to all 49 ridings to engage with both our supporters and people who are undecided. We're going to hold more online events and give people access. I'm going to make a lot of phone calls. The team's going to make a lot of phone calls between June 15th and July 30th. And then the ballots will be mailed out and folks will start voting online over the phone, in person on August 6th. But it'll be a lot more travel, a lot of phone calls, a lot of online meetings, and a lot of both listening and sharing ideas with people.
It's worth noting, and I was actually shocked that you're the first female candidate for Liberal leadership ever.
Yeah.
What took so long to get to this point in our New Brunswick history?
That's a great question. It's hard to say what took so long. We've certainly seen examples of women running and leading other parties. And so why so long for the Liberals? It's hard to say, other than I will say politics is not super accessible, right? It's not something just anybody can walk in off the street and raise the fee and get the signatures and take the time off, right? Like, I'm taking leave from work to do this. That's not possible for everyone, right? I'm really lucky to have support from my partner and from our family to make this possible, but not everybody has that option. And I think particularly women don't always have that option because of the tradition, I guess, or the historical responsibilities that we've carried for work and childcare and other things. So I think, I think these are institutions that are sometimes slow to change. And I certainly feel a responsibility that I desperately wanted to see diversity. I want to see diversity in the legislature. I want to see people of different backgrounds with different lived experience in the legislature helping to make policy. And as I was watching this race evolve and I was looking for that diversity of candidate and experience, and felt that, well, if I can work out my life such that this might be possible, then maybe I have a responsibility to, because not every woman can and not every person can. And so that was a piece of it for me, is that it should be visible. It should be visible to my 3 little girls. It should be visible to people who want to see themselves represented in the legislature, that there are options, that there are people going for that kind of leadership and offering, maybe a different background, a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk a little bit about your platform as we get closer and closer to the end of the interview? Just for takeaway, what are the key platform points that you want people to remember when? Let's talk first about when they're registering to vote.
Yeah. When people are registering to vote, I hope they'll be looking at who is going to lead a real renewal for the party, who's going to help our party connect with New Brunswickers, attract new people, and bring about the kind of government that really offers opportunity to advance for the province. For me, from a platform perspective, we've done a few different things as a team. We've been listening to Liberals and to future Liberals for the last, I don't know how many months, since December. And so we've chosen the priorities that they've articulated to us: healthcare, housing, the environment, the economy, right? Those are things that we've been exploring. I've been putting out blog posts about those topics, right, to put some ideas out there on how we could do things differently. And then it's what I've talked about a little bit already. I think what we really need is a change in political behavior. So I think it is that radical transparency. It's an authenticity and an empathy that we need to show as a political party and as politicians. I think it's that care, right? It's that heart on your sleeve care for New Brunswickers that, maybe we've in the past been very statesmanlike. I think people want to know that we're real and that we care about them. I think that's really what New Brunswickers are saying. And they want to see collaboration and connectedness. So that's my platform. It's a new politics that is open and transparent, authentic and empathetic, caring and collaborative. And I believe that change in how we do politics then gets applied to the what policy issue. Mm-hmm. And with that, I add this layer of digital transformation that leans on my tech background, but also a notion that we need to consciously strengthen our democracy, right? As we see this polarization happening, as we notice that we're arguing with our family members or with our neighbors about who's pro or who's anti, and as the conflict is starting to feel really, really close, I think we need to be intentionally making sure that our democratic institutions are strong and that people believe that their vote matters and that we're actively doing things to make sure that that vote does matter, right? That we're looking at electoral reform. We're looking at strengthening people's votes and strengthening our respect for New Brunswickers, whether that's Francophone New Brunswicker, Anglophone, First Nations, union members, women, children, you name it. We have to show that respect for New Brunswickers that leads by example in how we can come together and have conversations and bridge that polarization that it feels like society is moving toward. So I want to see attention to a stronger democracy, a digital transformation, and then this new type of politics that is transparent and authentic.
Beyond just being leader of the Liberal Party, what is it when you look at the current government that you think needs changing, that you'd be able to bring if you are the leader, beyond just being a new leader for the Liberals?
Yeah, I think it stems from what I was just talking about. I think there's a respect that I want to see shown to New Brunswickers. And I think some of that's missing when we see full-page ads being taken out against unions, or when we see maps of the province held up with half of them in red and being told that somebody might be taking our land. I think that's very divisive. I think it's very dangerous. I think that behavior needs to change, and it needs to come from a place of respect and love, because leadership shouldn't be setting an example of divisiveness and pitting us against each other. And that's one of the reasons why I chose to run. I was so frustrated by that example that was being set and by the nature of the communications to everyday New Brunswickers that treated them as less important than a different New Brunswicker. That's not the way forward. You know, we need respect for all New Brunswickers. We need a really caring government that can be vulnerable and be open, share data. I mean, during the pandemic, we have been desperate for data, and what used to be a daily press conference is now silence, which breeds mistrust, right? People are scared and anxious. They need leaders to be communicating and sharing information and doing that with care and respect. And so that's what I think that a refreshed Liberal Party could offer New Brunswickers.
And final thoughts for today's interview, not just why should people vote for you, but why should people bother to get out there, register, and vote at all?
Thank you for the question. I mean, it's true that these party-based leadership contests don't attract as much participation as a general election, even though this is really where the change starts. Who is going to be on the ballot in 2024 will be determined by the people who participate in these kinds of contests. So I would say to folks, if they care about who might lead our province, then it would be great to get engaged now and consider the four of us, consider who maybe represents the kind of New Brunswick or the kind of politics they want to see going forward, and get engaged now, because then that will affect the direction that the Liberal Party goes in, and thus the direction that the political discourse in New Brunswick will go in. And you know, you could say the same for there's leadership contests happening all over the place in other provinces at the federal level. I think the decisions are made by the people who show up. So I fully support getting engaged, participating, because that act of voting is what decides.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and come back whenever you are in St. Andrews.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Vicki.
My guest today is TJ Harvey, who is seeking leadership of the New Brunswick Liberal Party. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, and thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I'd love to start off. I know that the vote's happening in the starting on July 30th.
Yes.
Running till August 6th. So I'd love to give you the chance first off to just introduce yourself to the viewers at home and to voters, a little bit about your background.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here, first of all, and certainly my name's TJ Harvey. TJ stands for Thomas Joseph, originally from a small community kind of towards the center of the province called Juniper. Grew up there on a small family farm with my brothers and sisters, and that's my community of interest, the Florenceville-Bristol area, and I currently reside in Clearview, New Brunswick, about 20 minutes north of Florenceville, about 25 minutes south of Grand Falls, with my 3 out of my 4 kids. My oldest daughter Emma is just finished second year university in Nova Scotia, and then Madeline, Sarah, and Jack reside with me in that area, and that's where I call home.
Can you tell me a little bit about the start of your political career, which you started quite young in federal politics?
So my background within the party has always been more on the provincial side, but mostly at the grassroots level. So from the time I was 20 until now, I've always either been like a provincial riding vice president or president of a local association, the vice president or the president of the federal association in my region, and before and after federal politics, several years on each side, I've been the regional director for the Liberal Party provincially in the Valley region that runs from Grand Falls to Fredericton. So my background in the party has been very much grassroots based, organization, fundraising, team building, kind of in the St. John River Valley. And of course I was elected federally between 2015 and 2019 as the Member of Parliament for Tobic-Mactaquac. During that time I sat as the National Rural Caucus Chair for 1 out of the 4 years that I was elected federally. I also chaired an all-party caucus on ag innovation and automation that had membership from all the major political parties in Canada, so about 160 members total from across the country. I sat on the standing committees on Indigenous and Northern Affairs, the standing committee on natural resources, and the standing committee on public accounts.
And why did you step away from federal politics at the time that you did?
So if you look at your role as a federal politician, it's really divided into two parts. And the work that you do in Ottawa, for the most part, is on a national level, connected with national policy, and the work that you do at the riding level for your constituents is completely different type of work than what you do in Ottawa. And what I found over the 4-year period that I was elected federally is that the part of the role that I was truly passionate about was the work that we were doing in the province, in my riding, working with small and medium-sized businesses, advocating on behalf of people for things like CPP disability and Canada Child Benefit, and working with families in the St. John River Valley. And so for me, I think it's a natural progression for me to want to be involved politically more at the provincial level. And so I decided to not reoffer in 2019. And since then I've been back working in my business. And of course at that time, I didn't know that this opportunity would present itself now. But with politics, you can never be sure of what the timing is. And so I stepped away from federal politics and have been working in my business, and I'm really happy that I've had the opportunity over the last 18 months to travel the province and meet with New Brunswickers from corner to corner and have conversations about the priorities that are important to them.
Now, you were the first, I believe, of the 4 candidates for Liberal leader to declare that you were running. What was it about, and I know you've slightly answered this, but provincial politics that drew you back at the time that it did specifically?
Yeah, so I think after the election loss in 2020, I felt like there was a void within the party, and feeling a need for us to start, working at rebuilding riding associations and start thinking about the next election. And as I've done oftentimes in my business opportunities in the past, and in the careers that I've worked in transportation and construction and large-scale agriculture and agri-food processing, when I see an issue that I think needs to be dealt with, I jump on that issue and I put my whole heart into it. So I made up my mind shortly after the last provincial election that I was going to run for the leadership, and since then, every day at some point or on some level, I've been traveling and having conversations and drumming up support for the leadership and working to reinvigorate the Liberal Party of New Brunswick.
And you've obviously touched on this too. What do you think it was that the Liberals, they did lose some traction last election, is fair to say. Why do you think that is, and what do you think took it off track?
I think, there was a variety of factors. One, I think, having an election in the middle of the pandemic, people were concerned about their own safety and the safety of their families. They were worried about the healthcare system, which of course has continued on to now, and really feeling vulnerable. And I think they were looking for a sense of security. So of course the natural tendency would be to vote for the incumbent government at that time. And we saw that be the case in various elections, both provincially and federally across the country. So I think that played a major role. And I think that for us as a party, we were coming off a tough election in 2018. Of course, the leader of the day was not in the House and was fairly new to provincial politics here in New Brunswick. And I think that those all played contributing factors. I commend Mr. Vickers for his hard work and all the effort he put into, working to rebuild the party at that time, and certainly it was a disappointing loss for us as a party, and I think it's something that we need to be cognizant of.
What is it about your background, your career, both in politics and in the private sector, that you think sets you up to be a good leader of the Liberal Party?
I think that the people that know me and know me best would characterize me as a person of action, a doer, somebody that traditionally rolls up their sleeves and puts in the heavy lifting to work on whatever I'm passionate about. And so that's been very evident in my private sector career, where I've enjoyed success in large-scale agriculture, transportation, agri-food processing, and construction. The majority of the time building and managing small and medium-sized businesses for my own, and some working for other companies. And I think that background, combined with 4 years in federal office and having had the opportunity to look at how policy is formulated and what some of the pitfalls can be for government trying to implement policy from the other side, give me a pretty broad perspective of what's going to be required to move this province in a direction that's more focused on a long-term vision for what the province could be, and less focused on a transactional vision that's reflective of what the province needs to have happen in a 12-month fiscal cycle.
Do you, what excites you about working on that provincial level versus federal? Do you feel there's more that you can do as a politician?
Yeah, well, I think the machinery of government is always the question. So, of course, municipal politics is by far the most maneuverable lever of government. Provincial is a little bit more difficult, and federal can be very cumbersome at times. And I think, for me, provincial governance is really close to the people. It's close to small businesses, it's close to medium-sized businesses, and we're a small province. 4.5 hours will drive you from corner to corner, no matter which direction. And it's really a space where you can get out and engage with people in their communities, in their businesses, have conversations with them where they work, where they live, at their kitchen table. And when you reach out and have conversations with somebody at their kitchen table, that's their kingdom, that's their piece of the world. And so it's important that we reach out and engage New Brunswickers, north and south, east and west, francophone and anglophone, where they live, where they work, and where they enjoy their free time. And so for me, I think that proximity to government is what's really allows us the capacity to go out and do that. And for me, it's something I'm truly excited about.
And New Brunswick definitely has that wonderful vibe of being a door-to-door province, like you said, 4.5 hours, one end to the other. You declared that you were running early, so it's really given you the opportunity to be on the campaign trail for quite some time. Where has it taken you, and what are you hearing from people as you do engage?
Yeah, so first, in terms of where it's taking me, I can say that it's led me to a place where over the last 18 months, I've put about 170,000 kilometers on my Jeep, and I've literally traveled from corner to corner, from Lamech to St. Andrews, and from St. Francois to Shediac, and I've enjoyed the opportunity to get out and speak with people in their communities and hear about the issues that are important to them. Of course, the issues that I find are at the top of mind for the most New Brunswickers, of course, are healthcare, which continues to be a large file and will continue to be, a dominant file for years to come. People are also concerned about affordability. And so when we're talking about the economy, it's not always about, economic development and how we help businesses. It's about how we make life more affordable for average New Brunswickers. And I think when you're traveling, regardless which community you're in, more and more day over day, affordability in people's daily lives is starting to become top of mind for a lot of families.
We're sitting today in the provincial riding of St. Croix, which is fairly anglophone, but as you mentioned, you're traveling from riding to riding across the province. Leaders can be criticized when they're not perfectly bilingual. How do you describe that aspect of your person?
Yeah, for myself, I think for sure my journey learning French as a second language has been a work in progress, and something that I've worked feverishly hard at since 2015 when I was elected federally. And it started with a night course at CCNB in Grand Falls, one night a week for I think 6 months. And then after I was elected federally, I started working at it weekly in my office. And then over the last 12 months, I've actually spent 3 weeks of intensive French language training in Shippigan at the University de Moncton campus, and practice, usually an hour a day, every day. and I'm using all the tools at my availability to do so. Et je pense pour certains, c'est vraiment important pour tous les citoyens de la province d'avoir la chance d'être représentés par un chef qui parle dans la langue de leur choix, de les enjeux qui est important pour toute la province. And that's exactly the type of leader that I plan to be.
Well, I commend you for that. I do Duolingo every day too, and I definitely speak French like an Anglophone, but I know how challenging it is to do that, so that's wonderful. Can you tell me what it's like being on the campaign trail with the other candidates? I know there have been multiple forums that have happened, especially over the course of the summer. What have you taken away from that? I know that the four of you have been actually quite supportive of each other. But on that note, what do you think separates you from the rest and makes you the better candidate?
I think first and foremost, I would say that this conversation about the leadership of the New Brunswick Liberal Party is very much attuned to a group of kids sitting around the kitchen table, and we're kind of arguing over who's going to get the mashed potatoes. And what's important out of that conversation is to remember that at the end of the day, no matter who wins, that we're all still united and we're all still a family. And I think that that's something that's lacked from the Liberal Party over the last 10 or 15 years. We've picked sides and become divided through leaderships, and it's something that we just simply can't afford to do going forward. We're a small party in a small province, and we need to be united as progressives. And I think having had the opportunity to travel the province and do these forums with the other three candidates, they're all good people, and you recognize that. And I've pre-existing working relationships with all three, and they all bring a different value proposition to the party. And I believe that value proposition is informed by their life circumstances. And so for me, I think that my value proposition to the party is that I've had a very diverse career in some of our province's primary industries and in secondary manufacturing, building and managing and operating businesses with small gross revenues from 500,000 to 600,000 all the way to 40 or 50 million. And I think that experience combined with my time in federal office and my exposure to the issues that affect rural New Brunswickers in rural parts of the province give me a distinct value proposition to the party. And certainly as an Anglophone that comes from a part of the province that people would perceive as being difficult at times to win as a Liberal, I think it gives me a unique perspective of what it's going to take to reorganize the party, to fundraise and build teams in all 49 ridings going into the next election. Because at the end of the day, if we want to be successful in the next election, we need to be relevant in all 49 ridings. And I think that my French language skills combined with my background and the intensity with which I do just about everything position me very well to hold our base in the 16 ridings that we currently have, but to grow the party ultimately in the ridings that we don't, in the regions that we don't currently hold. And I think that for me, that's my value proposition to the party, and something that I think makes me a little bit more unique than some of the other candidates.
Now, your track record obviously shows that you're capable of winning a riding, and a federal one at that, where there are much less ridings federally in New Brunswick. You're currently not an MLA, though. Do you know where you would run?
Yeah, I think that certainly following the leadership conclusion on August the 6th, it'll be a priority for me to find a riding and have conversations where we can try to get into the ledge as soon as possible through a by-election. That's certainly a priority for me. And at the same time, I think it's equally important that before that happens, that the new leader, and hopefully that's myself, has the time to go out and start that rebuilding process in ridings all around the province. So I think that hopefully within a 6 or 8 month period, we'll be able to have a seat in the legislature, should I be elected leader. And in the meantime, there's a ton of work to be done to start the rebuilding process of the Liberal Party of New Brunswick. And then certainly in the next provincial election, it would be my hope to run in one of the ridings that is in my former federal riding of Tobic-Mactaquac. So there's 5 provincial ridings there, and I haven't yet made a decision as to which one of those ridings I would run in, but certainly it would be my plan to run in one of the ridings that I formerly represented as a member of Parliament.
Now, aside from just strengthening the foundation of the party in New Brunswick, the Liberal Party, what will the challenges be of the next election when we're looking at specifically something like the People's Alliance joining the Conservatives here? Is that something that's of mind in terms of what a challenge is?
I think for sure we need to recognize where our strengths are and what our weaknesses are. And in rural parts of the province, we've got a lot of work to do on the value proposition or the brand proposition that we want to give to New Brunswickers, and how we position the party once again to be a big tent party that's representative of a multitude of views from different viewpoints, both rural and urban, francophone and anglophone, in center right, center left. I believe that historically the Liberal Party has been a big tent party in New Brunswick, and in recent years we narrowed our focus. We kind of said this is what a Liberal is in New Brunswick, and we need to get back to a space where we're open and inclusive and building teams that are representative of broad viewpoints. And before we can be relevant to New Brunswickers, we need to spend some time challenging our own opinions and thoughts within our party. And I think that that's all very healthy. And so for me, I think that having conversations with people that are maybe small c conservatives and people that have traditionally been members of the Green Party or members of the NDP are all very helpful. And I think that if those people can get engaged in the process and be part of the rebuilding process of the Liberal Party of New Brunswick, then their thoughts and opinions become part of the value proposition that we bring to New Brunswickers in the next election. And certainly I think that diversified view of what the province's future could look like is something that's hugely important to New Brunswickers, and something for me personally I think is hugely important that we showcase that as part of the value proposition that we want to bring to the province.
New Brunswick has a long history of a riding can change its mind. It's a door-to-door province, and there is a benefit to that if you are the right candidate, people are willing to switch. There isn't necessarily that party alliance that we see maybe in somewhere like Alberta.
Right.
Is that an advantage to you going into this next election, do you think?
I think so. I think we really need to go out and engage with three groups of people. So, in my campaign, and I know the other candidates have been doing this as well, we're really trying to engage three groups of people. So traditional Liberals that are still engaged in the party, still engaged in the process, and want to be part of the party's future. The second group of people is new people. So people that traditionally haven't seen themselves in the Liberal Party before, but want to get engaged, want to get involved, and want to be part of that shared vision or value proposition to the province for its future. And then I think the third group of people, which is a big group of people, are traditional Liberals that have been disenfranchised and because of that have been disengaged in the process in recent years. And so you bring those three groups of people together, and the biggest step is the next step. So when the leadership's over with, the new leader of the day, and hopefully, for my opinion at least, hope that will be me, needs to go out and engage with those groups of people to build teams and talk about policy and fundraise in every region of the province, in every riding in the province. And it's through that type of process that you will create a collective vision for the province's future that's representative of all 49 ridings and of various viewpoints on a whole plethora of issues. You'll also use that process to engage people that want to run for contested nominations in every riding around the province. And at the end of the day, when we go into the next election, if we have the right leader with the right message and the right team of candidates and the right team of volunteers behind them, we can be successful in any one of the 49 ridings in the province of New Brunswick. And it's always interesting when I'm talking to people to note that, in the last 25 years, every riding in the province of New Brunswick has been held by the Liberal Party at some point. So there are no unwinnable ridings, and they're all important to the party.
What are the challenges? You mentioned healthcare, you mentioned the housing crisis, that you think will be the biggest challenges for New Brunswick going forward?
Yeah, one thing I would say is that I think, from my perspective at least, that these challenges, they're all tied together. So, healthcare and how we look at healthcare going forward is hugely important to New Brunswickers. And from traveling and having conversations with people and engaging them about an issue like healthcare, I think what we've ascertained is that New Brunswickers think that we need to deal with these issues head on. And so that means making strategic investments in how we modernize our infrastructure. So how we modernize the delivery platforms that we use to deliver healthcare services through digitization and automation, investing in our people. So recognizing that, if we want to attract nurses and doctors and nurse practitioners and advanced care paramedics and pharmacists to come to the province of New Brunswick and to stay in the province of New Brunswick, then they need to, number one, feel like they're engaged in the process of policy development in their career. they also need to feel like they're being adequately compensated for the work that they're doing for New Brunswickers. And I think if the pandemic has done one thing, it's brought that to the forefront. And I think New Brunswickers are saying, yeah, we need to make sure that these people are looked after because they're the people that look after us. Mm-hmm. And then I think the third piece on healthcare is that we need to spend some time thinking about preventative healthcare. So, a seniors aging strategy and how we work with seniors to help them stay in their homes if that's the choice that they want to make, or how we help them transition to the next stage of their lives. And certainly mental health and addictions, and coming out of the pandemic, and I have 4 kids myself, it's interesting to see how the pandemic and the isolation that was created through that has affected each of my own children differently, and how I see it affecting other people's children and couples that feel like they're cut off from their friends and their family and seniors. So I think focusing on mental health and how we help people with those issues is hugely important on an issue like healthcare. Then the other major issues I think are population growth. So population growth to me in the short term is all about immigration. It's about how we attract and retain newcomers to New Brunswick, how we fix the system so that we can do a better job of skills accreditation and helping people transition into new careers in New Brunswick with the talents and that they already have, and recognizing the wealth of experience that they have in whatever province or country they come from. If they're coming to New Brunswick and they want to build a life here and have a career here, then we want them to be able to work in their field of study. So I think we've got a lot of work to do in that area. And then long term, I think population growth is about, how do we, through education, attract more students to come to New Brunswick and get a world-class education in one of our post-secondary institutions, either on the university side or on the vocational side. And then how do we convince those students to stay in New Brunswick for 5 years or 10 years post-secondary, post-secondary, and build a career here. And I think if we can convince students to stay in New Brunswick and incentivize them to stay in the province and build a career here and raise a family here, then over a long period of time, that too plays a key role in population growth.
Mm-hmm. Are there assets that New Brunswick has, attributes that you think set it apart from other provinces or other places in the world that aren't really being tapped to their full potential just yet?
Yeah, I mean, to name a few, I would say first and foremost, we have access to 2 deep water ports, fully developed deep water ports, and then of course we have smaller ports here in the province that are underutilized, and we're starting to see over the last few years, like the Port of Baldoon and the Port of St. John, kind of getting reinvigorated. And so I think those are huge assets, and those assets are also the home to a doorstep rail service. So we have world-class rail systems that are running to all of our deep water ports here in the province, and even in regions all over the province. So whether it's in the Baldoon region or in southwestern New Brunswick with the Southern Railway, we're seeing massive investments in rail infrastructure as part of a strategy to how we move goods around North America. So I think those are hugely important. And then New Brunswick is also home to the intersection of the largest continuous highway in Canada and the largest continuous highway in the United States. So the I-95 and the Trans-Canada. And so its intersection point in western New Brunswick, combined with our access to port, our massive footprint on a global stage in things like aquaculture, fisheries, large-scale agriculture and agri-food processing, and forestry, combined with being a fully bilingual province, positions us very well on the global stage for growth in the future.
Well, we're almost out of time, so I'm going to give you the final word. Mm-hmm. Why should people who are about to vote for the next leader of the Liberal Party vote for you? Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, and certainly I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and to people that are watching, I would say, this is really a choice about what the future of the Liberal Party looks like. And for me, I think that the value proposition that I bring to the party is that I'm an Anglophone from rural New Brunswick that can speak fluent French and that can go out and build on the base that we already have in certain parts of the province to win the next election. And to me, to the party membership and to New Brunswickers as a whole, I think at the end of the day, we can do better than what we've seen. And I'm not picking apart the current government, but what I am saying is that this is an approach to governance that's very transactional, and it's focused on getting from one budget cycle to the next budget cycle. And I think what I'm offering to first the Liberal Party of New Brunswick, and then to New Brunswickers as a whole, is the opportunity for a collaborative, collective, shared vision for the province's future that's imaginative and reflective of where we want to see the province in the next 25 to 30 years. And it's not all about my ideas and my plan. It's about how we collectively work together to rebuild the party and then position the province to take advantage of opportunities in the future.
Thank you so much for making time for us today and for coming into St. Andrews to sit down with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
My guest today is seeking leadership of the Liberal Party of New Brunswick, Donald Arseneault. Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'd love to start off by talking a lot about your history, especially for new voters who might not be familiar with you, but you had a long history in politics, starting in 2003?
2003. I was, right before I thought of coming into politics, I'm originally from Dalhousie. I was working in Caraquet, but living in Bathurst. For those 2 years, I was traveling an hour to Caraquet each and every day to the Fédération des Caisses Populaires, the credit unions. So that's where I was working. And then, Sean Graham at the time lured me to run into politics. And obviously my hometown is Dalhousie, so I had to go the other way and seek the nomination. And then eventually won my election in 2003 by about 345 votes. It was, a lot of door knocking, and I hadn't lived in my community for about 10 years. So it was really a great experience. I was 27 years of age at the time, but I just loved it. And and then we got elected. We went to the legislature. We were the opposition. We actually only lost that election by 18 votes. Brenda Fowley won her riding, and that really was the determining factor in that election. So. But got to learn a lot in opposition in the legislature, because when you're 27 and you get there in the legislature, it's intimidating when you've never done it before. The public speaking and all the files and dealing with government, and so it was a great 4 years. And then in 2006, seeked re-election again, and we're fortunate enough to become the government under the Graham government. And I was at that time the Minister of Natural Resources, and so that was a good time in that portfolio. And then we hit the economic recession, and back in 2008, around then, a lot of the pulp and paper mills, especially all across North America, really having some challenge and difficulties, and we lost a lot here throughout the province of New Brunswick, including my own. Bowater in Dalhousie was there for 84 years. Nobody ever thought that it would close its doors, and they employed, at the time of its closure, about 400 direct jobs, and obviously indirectly there was even more, but they had about 1,500 at one point in time of employees. So generation after generation, actually, people worked in the mill, and it was really, it's our whole front street. So it had a huge impact on the community. And when that is your whole industry, and we also had the chemical plant that was there, that supplied chemicals to the pulp and paper industry. And since there was less pulp and papers companies, then therefore they had to shut down too. And then because we didn't need as much electricity in New Brunswick, because the pulp and paper industry was a big consumer, and an ore emulsion contract was almost due, then the power plant closed. So in the span of that 1 year and a half, every major industry in that small town of Dalhousie shut down. So that was very difficult for the community, because obviously every household in the community and the surrounding areas was impacted. And as the local politician and minister representing the government, it was tough. And I grieve with them, because I have family and friends that worked in those industries. So, but we had to find a way to reinvent ourselves. Dalhousie is a lot like here in Charlotte County, like St. Andrews. You're along the water, so there's so much opportunity. Now St. Andrews developed more the tourism industry here, and it's flourishing each and every year. It's so beautiful to come here, and you see so many tourists from all over. Dalhousie could be the same thing. We're not at the same level as St. Andrews, but we definitely they can get there. So it took a long time before. first of all, getting the community to believe they can do something different, they can do something else. It was also challenging for the actual municipality because obviously the tax base went down big time. So when you go from a budget of $6-7 million operating budget and all of a sudden you get a $3 million operating budget, it makes for very difficult decisions. So as a government, we had to work real hard and closely with the community to make sure that they can get through that transition. And today they're doing really well, actually even having surpluses. So it's great. So I ran in 2010. Right before that, I was Minister of Post-Secondary Education, Training and Labor. Which is it was my favorite portfolio. I've always said I tell staff that anytime you can invest in people, it's a good thing. You know, and see them today, they're in the workplace and so forth. So we transformed the community college system. Community college used to be a division of government. Through this transformation, we gave them independence. So we have a NBCC network with a board of directors, and we have a CCNB network with a board of directors as well. And today they're doing great things. You know, they're able to invest in research capacity, innovation before they weren't allowed, because they were a division of government, they didn't have that independence and that ability to be able to do great things. And here in St. Andrews, we have a beautiful community college. That's really important for building or continuing to build the economy that we do have here in Charlotte County, especially on the hospitality and tourism side. So so I see great things for the NBCC network, including here in St. Andrews. So in 2010, unfortunately, we lost the election, and I became an opposition member again. And then we told ourselves that we don't like it here. We're going to go back to government. So, you know, we were down to probably about 13 MLAs at the time. And, you know, we took the next 4 years to rebuild the trust and rebuild our party, rebuild the trust with New Brunswickers. And we ended up winning back the government in 2014 under Gallant. And at that time, I became Minister of Energy and Mines. Then after a year or two, I moved on to post-secondary education, training and labor, intergovernmental affairs, official languages, as well as regional development corporation. So I've done quite a bit of portfolios. So it's, but I find that whole experience that I received over the last 15 years in my political experience, I'm the only candidate here in this leadership race that has that governance experience. And I think that is important because you know what you can and cannot do within government, because government's big, and so I think that's important to know how to move files forward. Also, just having the knowledge of the issues, been around some of these issues, working with stakeholders throughout those years, traveling the province, knowing I can go in any community and probably point to a stakeholder, a community project, or an individual in the communities that I've dealt with over the years, and that's a big bonus as well. The civil service, obviously, you know, I have tremendous respect for the civil service, and I value the work they bring forward, and in return, they provide, you know, the production that you're looking for in order to move some files forward. So, yeah, so it's it got me to where I'm at today, and I'm quite happy.
Now, obviously, when you have a long history in politics, there's a lot on your resume that says why you should be voted leader. But there can also be a history of challenges. When you look back on your long history in politics, what would you say were the most challenging times?
Well, not to repeat the whole story again, but obviously the most challenging time in my political career is when the recession in 2008 in my local mill fell. That was very challenging, but it was also the most defining time in my career as well. I remember one evening we had about 1,000 people jam-packed in their gymnasium in my local community, and people were angry, and we had all media from print to TV to radio, everybody was there, and for 3.5 hours I had to stand in front of a crowd at the mic answering questions or just hearing the venting. And, you know, you had people standing up that you know you've helped them or somebody in their family, or, you know, I don't get up in the morning, and no politician gets up in the morning and says, hey, let's close this place, or, you know, do something like that. And we don't think that. So, but you also have to understand that the community is grieving, and so they need to blame somebody. It's just the human culture kind of thing. So I took it for 3.5 hours. It was tough. The glass of wine afterwards was really good, but I remember that week when the Premier Graham at the time he kind of scolded cabinet, And he said, you know, how dare you guys leave him there by himself? Like, I went there for 3.5 by myself. And I said, Mr. Premier, I said, that was my decision. This is my community. I didn't want anybody else to be there. And when I want my colleagues to be there is that when we turn things around and we need the help of government to move a project forward, that's when I need my colleagues. So that defined me a lot in my caucus and in our cabinet, and just me as a person got to know myself a little bit more in those circumstances. But it also helps me in the future too, because governing is not easy. You're always going to have some tough files to deal with, and we're going through some very difficult files right now. Like, you know, I was at the State of the Province, and I knew the Premier was going to do this. Like, yes, we had surplus. Yes, the economy is doing well. Yes, the population numbers are growing. But you peel that off, you know, I do volunteer work at the Fredericton Food Kitchen. And you see, it's not just because there's a huge homeless issue in St. John and Fredericton and Moncton and a little bit in the other parts. But those aren't the only people coming in to take a meal for breakfast or lunch, or, you know, there was seniors in there. Now it's even worse with the cost of living going up and gas and groceries and all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of issues underlining, like affordable housing. You're seeing these rent increases. I just can't imagine being a senior on fixed income or a family on low income, and all of a sudden your rent goes up $300-400. There's a lot of those issues out there that I think that, you know, yes, we got to talk about the positive things that are going, but you also have to have empathy and focus on where we do have challenges. You know, you talk to companies today. You know, I was talking with Mr. Cook from Cook Aquaculture not that long ago, and, you know, he was talking about how addiction is a huge issue that he's trying to deal with, housing for workers, and you know, when you take a step back, either it's him or any other company you're talking to around the province, is that the business community are talking about issues that 20 years ago never thought they would be talking about. And, you know, like John Wishart from the Moncton Chamber of Commerce, he was talking about how homelessness is a huge issue and it has an impact on businesses downtown, and he has to deal with it. And he says, I can't deal with the other issues that we need some attention because I got to deal with this one. You didn't hear that kind of language, you know, 20 years ago. So things have changed, and I think there's a lot of issues that we're faced with in New Brunswick, but there's a lot of untapped opportunities as well. And so to go back to your question is my experience and my things that happened to me personally, I think helps me be able to confront some tough decisions moving forward as well.
I'm wondering what took you out of politics around 2017 and what it is inspiring you to come back now, just 5 years later. Yeah,
well, look, in 2017, at that time, I've put in about 15 years into politics, which is a long time, more than, you know, the average politician here in New Brunswick. I felt that I've given a lot. I've given my time to my community. And a little bit going back to my community of Dalhousie is that now 10 years later after the mill closed, we've got to the point where we turn things around. And I felt maybe now's the time that we can hand over the baton to somebody else with a new vision for the area. And at the same time, I had interest in the trying to not necessarily get into federal politics, but to work with the federal government in Ottawa. So I did accept a job as a government relations manager for Canada's Building Trades Union. So I was living in Fredericton. Every week I was going to Ottawa back and forth. And I did that for 2 years. Great experience, don't get me wrong. I loved Ottawa and love networking with the federal government of the time. And but after 2 years, I really realized I missed provincial politics. I missed being closer to the public and the communities, the stakeholders. You're more hands-on in trying to solve issues in provincial politics. So I came back and started looking at how I can help the provincial party at the time. So here we are. Here's an opportunity that I saw that I can bring my experience and to the table and offer it to our Liberal members that are going to be voting on August 6th and hoping that they will choose me as their next leader. And if they don't, I'll respect that decision as well.
Is it fair to say in the 2020 election, it was disappointing for the Liberal Party, and is it fair to say that you have a better grasp on where you think it's going now?
I do think I have a better grasp. Look, I mean, it was Mr. Vickers is a great man, a great resume. Unfortunately, he has never ran in a provincial election before, so it was difficult for him as well. Then we throw in COVID in there, where there was no interaction with the public that much, so that made it difficult. There was no opportunity for him to in a by-election to be able to gain a seat and be in the legislature and gain that kind of experience. So it was difficult for him. And the premier at the time called the election, and you know, would I have done the same thing? Probably so. It was an opportune time where people were, like, at that time, COVID was managed better than towards the end, but at that time, and you know, look, we have a lot of seniors in New Brunswick and a lot of people that are concerned with healthcare, and they were concerned with COVID, and you don't want to start changing everything just because there's an election. There's an opportunity to change. So I think you've seen a lot of people just wanted to play it safe at that time, but the Liberal Party wasn't ready. You know, I was brought in a month before the election to manage the campaign. You know, the party was struggling financially. They had no platform that was built. The candidate recruitment was really lacking at that time, and you're in a minority situation. So with 1 month to go, a lot of work had to be done to try to get us to a level that, you know, we can run a respectable campaign. Look, at the end, we lost a few seats, but we have 16. Well, at election time we had 17, but obviously with Lisa Harris leaving now, the Liberals are at 16. We have 2 years to plan now, and I've always said what the Liberal Party needs is better planning. So August 6th is the convention. There's a new leader. If I'm given that opportunity, well, a week later I'll name a campaign manager, and they have 2 years to plan. It's fixed election dates. We know when it is, third Monday in October 2024. So, you know, start planning now. Don't procrastinate. Wait till, you know, I'll wait all next week and the week after and the month after, and then it all, in politics, time flies. So I do feel that, you know, the understanding of what happened back in 2020, you know, what people expect, and I do have that grasp, and I do think I'm the best situated person in order to lead us into 2024.
And is that your sense on the campaign trail now, as you're seeking leadership, that the voters are feeling very much differently than they felt in 2020? And we see that in New Brunswick often within a 4-year period. The whole province can shift its perspective.
Well, no doubt that, look, there's been a lot of frustration over the last several months, and people are hurting financially right now, and we feel that the government is not the most accountable at the moment. You know, just to put in perspective, as of May 1st, we can add a few weeks, but I did the calculation as of May 1st. Blaine Higgs has been premier for 1,284 days. If I asked you how many question periods there were in those 1,284 days, how many would you think?
I don't know.
120.
Okay.
That's not a lot. And the legislature is important. You know, in Ottawa, in Parliament, they sit a minimum of 165 days a year. And under Higgs, I don't even know if we reach 50 days a year. He doesn't want to go to the legislature where he gets questions by the opposition parties. And we need that. You know, we have a throne speech every year. Every fall, the Premier does a throne speech. And that lays out the agenda for the government and what they want to do. And there's a lot of files out there. We talk about municipal reform, health reform, all that stuff. You put that in your throne speech, what exactly you're going to do. We haven't had one since November 19, 2020. We're going on almost 2 years without a throne speech. So he's given himself a carte blanche to do whatever he wants. That's not being accountable to New Brunswickers in the legislature. You know, we have in Miramichi on the June 20th, we're finally going to get those by-election going to happen. But Miramichi's been left without 2 seats for the past year. For 1 year, they've been without those 2 seats at a time where we're talking about municipal reform, where it does have an impact in the Miramichi, but nobody can stand up in Miramichi and ask the question to the Premier in the legislature, or health reform, which is always sensitive in every region of our province. But yet there's 2 seats that are vacant for the past year that they can't ask the questions. They had 2 health commissioners. They muzzled both of them. They can't answer questions on what is it that they're trying to achieve here with our healthcare system. So all these factors and so many more makes it such that, you know, this is probably the most unaccountable premier in government that we've seen in modern history. and that needs to change. And so when I say people are hurting, people want, a lot of times to put forward initiatives to help people is you got to be in the legislature. But if you're not in the legislature, a lot of these initiatives don't get done. We're the only province in the country that had a surplus budget over the last 2 years, almost $1 billion, 900 million, I think, in some. And yes, we need to be fiscally responsible. As a Liberal government moving forward, I want our government to be fiscally responsible. But you also have to have empathy for those who needs a helping hand. They've left $900 million there in surplus. Now, a portion of that's federal money, I get that, but there has to be some room to maneuver there. We have in the carbon tax this year projected revenue of $226 million. That is a tax that consumers that we pay, at the pump, and that's supposed to be reinvested, but we're not seeing that reinvestment being done. It's not there to pad your budget surplus. It's there to reinvest in either energy efficient programs or other measures you can do to help people at the pumps and not. Just the gas tax, when they did their projections, I don't know what the numbers they use, but I would think, let's say they would project the revenue based on $1.50 a liter. Well, it's $2.07. So the government is making, on that 57 cents, they're making money on that. So why can't we reinvest that? Keep what you projected, but the extra, why don't you reinvest at a time where people are hurting in so many ways?
What is the Liberal perspective on the People's Alliance, the two members, Michelle Conroy and Chris Austin, moving to the Conservative Party?
Well, look, we knew they were working very closely together, and it is what it is. I find it unfortunate to have a political party, because now they're back in, that has those kinds of views. I get that, we have some differences, but look, I've done many political panels with Chris Austin over the years, and there's a lot of the comments that he made I find is unfortunate, but I'm not surprised that they both crossed the floor over to the government. They've been working hand in hand and you just wait. This is the last week of the legislature. Give it a couple of weeks. Premier Hayes is going to do a cabinet shuffle, and I would put $100, I'm going to say to your viewers, $100 on the table that Chris Austin is going to be in cabinet.
Okay, well, I will watch for that. For our last few minutes here, what are the key platform takeaways for you if you are elected leader?
Well, look, for me, my biggest priority, what I want to focus on as a government is families, investing in families. And I think every decision the government does, we need to go back and what's the impact, the financial and emotional impact on families. I see what's happening now. You got young couples that are, have high student debts. That first mortgage, even more so in the market that we're in now, is very hard. If it's even affordable housing is very hard to find. There's property taxes are continuing to increase, and all these factors and many more, it prevents you from wanting to have kids. We have about 6,200 births per year, and we have about 7,600 deaths per year. Yes, we got to focus on immigration, don't get me wrong, but we also need to find ways of how do we make our own families grow here in New Brunswick, that the people that are already here. So I do want a family policy. I do want a birth policy, and actually I put those media releases out in the last several weeks. I do think we need to find ways that if we can reduce the financial burden on families, then we can hopefully they can grow their families as well. And I think for me that's a huge opportunity and a huge priority for me. Also investing in people, maybe it's my time at post-secondary education, training, and labor. We need to invest in people, invest in training. We need to grow our population with immigration. We also need to rebuild our relationship with Indigenous communities. It is the worst that I've seen in modern history. The the way that this premier is acting towards Indigenous communities, I find it's very unfortunate, and we need them. I had the opportunity to work with Indigenous communities through natural resource, either in the mining sector, the energy sector, the forestry sector, when I had those portfolios, in dialogue. They want to work too, and they want to be part of the solution. So that is another component that the next government, whoever it is for me, but whoever it is, needs to really focus on that as well as a priority.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here today, and I hope to have you back again
Oh,
soon.
I will, August 7th.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.